Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness. I'm Annette Bybee, I'm your host, and today we are going to be talking about something that's probably on most people's minds, how to handle all of this terrible uncertainty. And so I brought the expert, the pro, the man that's given me gold in the past, Dr. Matt Townsend. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Thanks, Annette. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, I've got this cold sore on my lip. I've just got to put that out there because people are going to be like, what the heck?
Is that what that is?
Yeah, exactly. And that's always a really good indication to me that I'm overloaded. And so, as everyone knows, well, you know what, first, tell me a little bit about you, because everybody that I know knows you, but not everyone that listens to you knows you.
Well, I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, Draper, Utah, and for about 25 years, I've basically been in the coaching and the self-improvement world. I spent 7 years with Franklin Covey Company as a trainer, as a consultant for them. On the side, I was a mediator, a divorce mediator. I had a master's degree in conflict resolution. Then I got another master's in human development, and then a PhD in human systems. And what I now focus on is kind of basically life coaching, relationship coaching, and leadership coaching. And I just love people, and I love helping people get better. So it's weird, Annette, because I started this whole thing working with couples, and then it actually morphed into a lot of the couples that were struggling had a lot of stress. They had a lot of anxiety. And so I just started learning about it, and then learned a lot about myself in the meantime. And that kind of led me more into this more recent, focus on anxiety.
Awesome. And I discovered you by seeing you speak at a singles conference, and it was like one of those little, like a switch went off in my brain, and things have never been the same. And so you've done so much for me just in listening to you, and the episodes that you've recorded for me. Actually, I have to share this. Last time we had Fast Sunday, a friend, I won't say who, was fasting about needing some help with something. And that morning I decided I needed to listen to our last podcast, or the one that about getting out of your mind and into your spirit. And I reposted it on Facebook because it's one of my favorites. And she messaged me later and said it was just what she needed.
Oh, isn't that amazing?
So, and you also have this book, Starve Stuff, which my mom shared with me. And if I ever get another relationship, I will.
Well, let's get rid of the cold sore first.
Yeah.
Then we can get to the relationship.
That would help, yes, in many ways. So obviously right now we're sitting in 2020. It's now November. And I think the last time we talked, it was summer. And I never imagined it would drag on this long.
I know, who did, right?
And it's become a marathon rather than a sprint. And now, like, I'm in Colorado, our state just went to red status.
Oh boy, yeah.
We're locked down almost as tight as you can get again. Obviously the election is still kind of up in the air, and we won't even get into that. But
looming.
Let's just say there's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Yeah.
And it's become to the point where every day it's like, my girls were in school, now they're no longer, they're now online. So you just don't know what every day is going to bring.
No.
And so I imagine I'm not the only one with cold sore and other things. We're just feeling tremendously stressed about it. And also, because we talked about this before, we're both highly sensitive.
Yeah.
And for people that are listening, find my last episode, what I did about this with Matt, because it opened my eyes big time. But for us that are highly sensitive, it's even worse.
Oh, yeah.
And we flip. And I've seen this. I can see it in myself, flipping between anxiety and depression, too much stimulus, anxiety, too little depression. And so I wanted to talk to you today about how all of us high sensitives and non-high sensitives alike can manage the day-to-day uncertainty and stay sane.
Yeah, great. It's such a big thing because one of the things I'm learning that is changing me a lot is your anxiety can come from a lot of different places, right? It can come from the outside in, so our environment, and into our bodies, into our kind of relationships, into our thinking, into our spirit, or it can sometimes come more from the inside out. And so it can maybe start in our lack of knowing who we are, which creates some fear, which then creates some thinking issues, which then impacts our relationships and then our bodies. And then, so one of the things that I'm a big believer in is starting to notice where you feel like your anxiety comes from. Right now, a lot of it's situational, right? We don't know what's going on with the pandemic. We know it's going to get worse just because of this end of year kind of cold season thing. But we also didn't know very well what was going on politically. That was creating tension. The economy was struggling, plus just life and stress of having to be with people all the time, trapped in your house, helping your kids. So one of the things I think about all anxiety is, and just stress in general, is know that no matter what's going on with you, there are solutions. It doesn't have to be a permanent state. Anxiety is really just your body's way of having you pay attention to what's going on, right? It's to help us make sure we don't get hurt and that we take advantage of opportunities. And then sometimes if we don't know how to control it, if we don't know that it's going on, then it gets away from us. So one of the first rules I say overall is pay attention to it. Don't run from it. Don't hide it. Don't just medicate it. Don't ignore it. When you feel it's happening, you must deal with it. And there's a great Marcus Aurelius quote that says, the obstacle is the way. The obstacle, the thing that most is hard for you to do, is the thing you need to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you're afraid of something socially because you have a little social anxiety, then that is the thing you need to fix. Period. If you're insecure about your own intellect, then that is the thing you need to address. And the cool thing too, I believe, Annette, is that is also the way to your God, right? So it's always the hardest thing, the divorce. That's the thing you have to get through. And when you get through it, and you get through it with God, then you no longer have it, or it doesn't have you. And so that's part of this key, I think, with anxiety, is a lot of it is because it's uncertain. We don't want to deal with it, so we don't deal with it, and not dealing with it makes us uncertain.
Well, I think part of the problem, like for me personally, I would say a big part of the reason why I'm stressing so much is because so much of this is out of my control.
Right.
I can do nothing. Like I can do nothing about getting my kids back in school.
Right.
I can do nothing about the election. There are so many things that are just completely beyond me that I feel like I'm at the mercy of. And, I don't know what to do. I don't, how,
yeah.
It's like, I feel like there's these forces that are just coming in against me,
But you know what, let's talk about that for a minute, because that is what you just addressed is probably one of the universal issues of anxiety, right? And as soon as I think all of us get this, and some of this is just how we've been raised, some of this is just how we think, but let me let everybody in on a secret, okay? Pretty much everything in the world operates out of your control. Everything, right? And so the problem with being a human is that your brain wants to think it can control it. But 99.99999% of the things in this world you can't control. And so where I learned this is I was taking my son to grad school. He was going to grad school. So we were driving from Salt Lake to UNLV, which is where he's getting a master's in marriage and family counseling.
Oh, like
by all means, why would he do that? What a loser. And but as we're driving there, we had this plan. We knew exactly how we were going to do it. We knew when we were going to be there. We knew how many days it would take. And on the way down, we got a message saying that the roads were going to be closed and we were going to be delayed. And we kind of thought, oh, whatever, yeah, sure, a few minutes. Well, we were delayed for hours.
Oh.
And there was nowhere you can go, right? There's kind of only one road down through southern Utah. And we were stuck. And as I fought it, I fought it. And the whole time I'm thinking, this is the dumbest thing in the world. Like, why would it take 6 hours to get a truck to stop burning? Like, come on, how hard is this? And my mind went through all these iterations. And what that was, I learned, Annette, was my mind trying to make sense of something I couldn't control. And I fought it and I fought it and fought it until I came to this realization that because it's out of my control, as soon as I just accept that, we were stopped on I-15 and my mind was spinning about all the inconsistencies and how unfair this is and how dumb bureaucracy is and why aren't fire trucks here. And when I finally just noticed what my mind was doing, I took a deep breath and I just accepted it. And weirdly, it all went away. I didn't stress about it because now what was happening to me is I was now noticing my mind making a big deal out of this. And once I noticed my mind making a big deal out of it, it was no longer me. It was now my mind. And so in Buddhism, they call this mindfulness. I recognized that it's out of my control to control this. And then what I did is weirdly, I just accepted it. I just accepted it. I didn't have to like it. You'll notice that's what your mind does is the minute something happens to you, your mind, in order to control it, tries to put a preference on it. Like we like it or we dislike it. We want it or we don't want it. We need it or we don't need it. And the minute our mind starts doing that, it's its way to control it. But the funny thing is I didn't have any more control hating it than I did when I just let it go. And so the minute I noticed my mind was doing it, I just took a deep breath, blew it out slowly. I even rolled my window down. By the way, my wife and my son were in another car next to me. And I just sat there and I could feel the warm air come in from the desert. And I just sat there and felt incredible peace. And then as I was sitting there, I actually started to think how grateful I am that my son's going to college, that we're doing this together. And my mind could actually go to a more peaceful place. And I literally sat that way for about 40 minutes. I didn't listen to a book on tape. I just sat there in kind of meditation. And right then it dawned on me that, you know what, we have a lot more control over this than we think. But you have to start paying attention to your mind and the what your mind does to try to create some sense of control. Because that, I think, is where anxiety ends up living. And then that generates feelings and chemistry and fear and insecurity. And we just stay in our mind thinking that's us.
So it sounds like right now, especially, there's a lot of just acceptance.
Yeah. Well, by the way, actually what you have is a lot of unacceptance still,
Yeah.
right? Because think of like how many people can't believe it, right? And think of how many people are mad about it. And think of how many people have a position on it. And how many people think we should have masks and how many think we shouldn't. Notice, and they're all arguing as if any of them have any control over it, right? Like we can control whether we wear a mask or not, but you can't control the COVID numbers. They're going up.
Right.
You could try not to be out, but then there's other people that are, and then you're disgusted that they are, or you're disgusted that they're not. So if you notice, there is a really interesting idea that says to the amount or level of preferences you have in your life is the degree to which you suffer. The more preferences you have, the more suffering you will have. The more things you don't prefer or care how they go, either way. And so that sounds bad, right? Like people should care, but yeah, but even your God, your Christ, eventually had to just accept it. Nevertheless, not my will be done. And once you can just accept what is, and you don't have to prefer it to be a certain way, you're really free, right? You're really free.
Well, this virus is kind of the epitome of something we can't control. I mean,
yeah.
No matter, I keep telling my friends, like, look, it's going to have, the virus is going to do what it's going to do. People are masking, social distance, you can do all those things, that's great, but the virus doesn't really care. It's just doing what it's doing.
That's right.
Also, this kind of reminds me, we just heard from our prophet. Did you listen to his message?
Yeah.
And that was very helpful because it was all about gratitude, which is all about pulling out of your mindset of wherever you're at.
And by the way, notice gratitude's acceptance, right? And it's like accepting the gift and thanking God for the gift. And And so that gets into kind of C.S. Lewis's belief about the given gift and the accepted gift. And sometimes he teaches that, like, if you go out into the forest looking for a meal, and you have this expectation of what you want the meal to look like, you're going to look for berries, and you're going to look for maybe, you know, a rabbit or a deer or whatever to eat. But you might actually step over the mushrooms that are edible, and you might look over the roots that you could eat, and you wouldn't accept the squirrel as a meal because you're looking for the deer. And he called that the expected gifts versus the what would he call it? The expected gift versus the given gift. And we've all been given gifts, and there's really cool research about when you just accept the gifts you've been given, like take what life gives you and do something with it. Those people are happier than those that are constantly expecting another gift. When you expect a gift and you don't get it, then you're always expecting. And even when the other gifts come to you, if you were expecting another one, you're not looking at the ones you're given. So a really cool way to find peace is to just always go thank God for the given gifts. 3 a day. Count your blessings. Find 3 blessings every day that have been given. And weirdly, sometimes they are in the middle of your biggest conflict. You may have even noticed, like, even in a divorce, there are incredible gifts. And even in an injury or even in a cancer diagnosis, there are incredible gifts. I had a friend of mine that had cancer, and I don't know why I asked her this. We were at a junior jazz game, and I just heard that she was having a hard time, and we were talking, and she said she was telling me about some of her difficulties with cancer and what they're doing and the surgeries. And I just, for some reason, asked, what's the number one blessing of cancer? What is your greatest learning or your favorite blessing? And she just immediately changed her tune and just started to cry. And she said, do you have any idea what it feels like to have thousands or hundreds or thousands of people praying for you every day? She says, I feel it every day. And she says, I'm not even a very religious person, but I feel their prayers every day. And so that's what the blessing is.
That's awesome.
And isn't that weird? So, and you can find it, and weirdly, it takes the anxiety away because you're now weirdly in the present, in the now, in the spirit, in the blessing. And that immediately, by the way, removes you from your mind. And once you move back from your mind, back into your spirit, the anxiety releases.
When you mention finding those blessings during really difficult times, it takes me back to a few. I would say some of the strongest memories that I have are of spiritual experiences that I've had in the midst of a big trial. Like,
oh, yeah.
Those things those stick with you. And you're right, because 2020, even though it's been a big dumpster fire, I can go back and see some of the more some really, really spiritual experiences that I probably would not have had if it hadn't been the year.
Yeah. Haven't you noticed a calmness too? Like in other times, you're with your family more. You're forced to have to deal with. See, before we didn't have to deal with how ornery they were because they'd go to school and we'd go to school. And so if you notice, what we were always doing was we were never dealing with the issues. We were always pawning them off to the next activity. But now we're having to deal with them. And I think weirdly, that's super hard, but it's also probably making us better.
Yeah. So I want to go back to what you said about the obstacle is the way, because that's like sticking in the back of my mind right now as well. So can you give me another example of what that would mean? You said like the being nervous about socializing is the way. You have to go and find that way to socialize.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think that would apply to right now with all the uncertainty and the like having kids home and,
Yeah.
it's a super stressful situation.
Yeah. I'm trying to find there is I'm trying to find the quote, because if Marcus Aurelius can explain it better than me.
Okay.
But
I like it.
there's another quote to it. But one of the ideas, for example, is what I think you're here to do is on this earth is you're not here. We always kind of think of it spiritually, religiously as just a judgment. But what it is it's an experiment. It's an experience. And you're here to gain experience. And you're not here to gain experience. You're not here to take the first grade over and over and over and over. Like if it was only about being good, then we should just stay at the first grade level and just crush it and just keep crushing first grade and crush it again the next year. But what we always do, if you notice, is we always push them to second grade. And in second grade, they fail for half the year and then they kill it the other half of the year. And even if they're doing well, and if they're doing too well, then they really should be at third grade. And then they should really be at fourth grade. And there's no end to the next grade, which means the next obstacle is always the way to become what you need to become.
Right.
But if we think our goal is perfection, then we think we ought to just stay at the grade we're at. And then when the obstacles come, we don't see the obstacles as advancing us. We see the obstacles as impeding us.
Mm-hmm.
But what the obstacles are really doing is they're creating these cracks in us. They create the cracks in our armor. And when it's always through the cracks that the light comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're not cracking, we're not stressed enough. And by the way, if we're shattering and pulverized to dust, then we were overdoing it. We were overstressed. But most of us like to not even create any cracks or any stress. And that's where we get comments like, how could a God do this to us? Why would a God that loves us torture us like this and make life so hard? And again, I don't know that he's making life hard. I think that's actually what we as humans do. We make life hard. And I think it's our minds that make life hard. And I'm a big believer that when Satan, when we partook of the fruit, I believe that is where the carnal mind was born. It was in the garden when the fruit was taken that our eyes were opened and we had the power to become like gods. And that is that Satan would have the power to bruise us through the mind, but we would have the power to crush Satan's head, which is through the Spirit. When our spirit ends up turning to our God and we commune, anxiety goes away. Maybe only for a minute. And then we come back to reality and the earth weighs us down again. And we carry the load, and then we carry the load, and then we eventually have to look back to God, and he lifts the load. Have you ever heard me talk about the yoke? Did I talk about that with you on the
I don't think so.
So I learned something really cool about, the yoke, like the yoke they put on oxen and animals. I guess in the Middle East, the wood was really heavy wood that they would use. So when they put the yoke on the oxen, it was so heavy that when the oxen would bend down to get a drink of water, it would literally push their head underwater. They couldn't hold it. So the owner, the master, would come in when they needed to water and feed the animals, and he would lift the yoke. He'd hold the weight of the yoke up, and then the animals could bend down and drink and rest and eat. And then they'd pull themselves back up, straighten their shoulders, just like the Savior did when he went to Jerusalem. He had to square up and go face his mission. And then God would lower the yoke back down, and the burden would now be heavy again, or heavier. But it would be light when he lifted the yoke. And so when we have anxiety during times like this, to me, the key is be careful that you don't turn too much inward and start beating yourself up and pointing your arrows at yourself and killing yourself. And instead start pointing your arrows out. Look for the blessings. Look for your God. Find your voice. You're in a covenant with God. So if you're in a covenant with God, then use the covenant to help you through these times. And turn your arrows out by serving others, loving others, lifting others, learning about your own insecurities, your own inadequacies. And then let the Lord carry the burden when he needs to, and let him have the burden on you when he needs to.
Awesome. So do you think also reframing it, it's funny. I've been sort of going down a rabbit hole studying the second coming.
Yeah.
There's a lot of predictions, right? And so part of me is like, bring it, I'm just
bring it on.
Let's go. Let's do this thing. And so I've been talking to my girls about it a little bit, trying not to like freak them out, but just explaining, that this is going to come down the line. And my one daughter asked me the other day, Mom, is the coronavirus here because the second coming is coming? And I was like, oh, it's got nothing to do with it. And then like a few hours later, well, maybe, just maybe, this is a preparatory period for us. And this is just something, I don't know when the second coming is, but if it's getting closer, maybe this is just a time for us to like maybe get strengthened. This is a time to really work on our spiritual growth, work on preparation. Because it's made me think a lot more about food storage and having money and having, being spiritually prepared and all that.
Yeah.
And so I went back to her and I said, it could be that this is just part of that.
Yes. And, that's the reframe, right? You're reframing.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's what I was thinking, maybe reframing this is the Lord's way of preparing us for.
By the way, what if our reframe, the cool thing is because the pandemic is, by the way, you can reframe anything, right? And the psychology behind a reframe is really powerful. It's, this is one of the things I teach in my program is, so if I gave you a 20 or a 12-ounce can of Diet Coke, if you're a Diet Coke drinker, and you shook the can up, it was sealed, and we shook the can up and we opened the can right by your face, what would happen?
It would squirt all over me.
You'd feel a ton of pressure, right?
Yes.
Now, what happens if I take 12 ounces of soda, put it in a 55-gallon drum, seal it up, and we shake the drum, and then I put the opening by your face and we open it?
Nothing.
Where did the pressure go?
Yeah, all through the drum.
To watch. When we change the capacity of the vessel, the pressure changes. That's the reframe. So anytime you change the what's it called? Anytime you change the size of the vessel or the thought, the pressure of the thought changes. So the coronavirus is a really pressureful thing. When we think of how many it's killing, when we think of its potential, when we think of our loved ones, there's a ton of pressure to it. But when you reframe the pressure of that thought to something eternal, to a never-ending bigger vessel that can contain it, the pressure changes. And so that reframe is a beautiful reframe. And by the way, the reframe that maybe coronavirus is here to teach us something is a permanent reframe you could use about any challenge. Maybe my heart disease is trying to teach me something. Maybe my divorce is trying to teach me something. Maybe being short is trying to teach me something. Maybe not being able to have kids is trying to get me closer to God. And so I believe that is kind of a permanent paradigm frame that is the difference of what believers have and non-believers have. Now watch though, there are some people, for example, though, that are studying the millennium and the second coming, and it's not relieving pressure.
It's increasing it.
That's right. And so that's one of the keys is if you need to be aware of how you're using your thoughts. There is weirdly, just psychologically, a danger to being too end of world focused.
Oh yeah.
Because it's not in the now.
Right.
And human beings, here's the coolest thing I've learned recently is the spirit you can only feel right now. So the minute you're projecting the future and you can't live there yet, you're basically postponing any peace. Now, the only way you can feel peace about worrying about the end of the world is when you go get your food storage together in the now.
Right.
So remember that anytime and this is another principle of getting rid of anxiety right now, is action. Anxiety is designed to get you to act, not to just spin and to think, but to actually go act on the anxiety. And the minute you notice the anxiety and you're acting on the anxiety, anxiety tends to dissipate. If you're noticing the anxiety and you're just thinking about it more, it doesn't dissipate. It gets exaggerated. So notice there's a reframe. That's a powerful thing to manage anxiety. Staying in the now is a powerful thing to manage anxiety. By the way, most anxiety is in the future and most guilt is from your past. So when you're living too far into the past, you're way guilty. You always feel regret. And when you live too far into the future, you're always feeling anxiety, which is why the scriptures tell us that now is the time to prepare to meet God. Now is the time you feel the Spirit. So being in the now is another one. And another principle of managing anxiety is action. And by the way, not any action. Notice how many people, when they found out about COVID, bought a ton of toilet paper.
I know.
Yeah. And we all felt, I guess, good about that. But weirdly, it didn't get rid of anxiety issues. I didn't get rid of COVID anxiety issues, right? We should have bought masks, or we should have studied it more.
Right.
You know how many people still are just believing a million lies about COVID? Like they just believe a million lies. They're not even researching it. So action on anxiety is another killer way to manage anxiety.
Right. All right. So now can you help me a little bit with the flip side when it turns into depression? Because it's I think you're the one that taught me that anxiety and depression are the same coin, two sides of the same coin. Yeah. And so a lot of times I'm like, oh, I'm not anxious. That's good. I'd rather be depressed than anxious. But really, because it's not anxious. You don't feel anxious. Yeah. However, it puts you in a place where you can't really get anything done and your life's not happy and you're not joyful and all that. Yeah. So what's a good way, especially because for us highly sensitive types, it's easy. It's easy to fall into.
Well, and one of the things I can't remember if I taught you is there is a difference. So anxiety, so highly sensitive people feel more, they notice more, about 3 to 4 times more information, which makes them anxious. Mm-hmm. Now there's a really cool metaphor to think about when you think about this is if we're playing cards or Uno or whatever, when I dole out or deal out the deck and you've got your cards and you have your hand isn't necessarily good or bad. It just is, because you don't know what's coming. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you don't know what's coming. It could be that every card that everyone else puts down, you have the perfect mix of cards to answer it. But so the key isn't necessarily the cards you're dealt. The key is what you actually do with your hand. Whether the hand is good or bad is what you do with it. And so the minute you have anxiety, there's a moment of choice where you have to decide what you're going to do with it. And if you decide what we tend to do to make this binary is we tend to go over, which is where we blow up, freak out, yell, scream, be a perfectionist, do all of our over traits as anxious people, mm-hmm. or we go under. Mm-hmm. Under is where we hide, veg, ignore, blah, 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 hate, wish, dream, hope, all these other things. Mm-hmm. Ruminate. And so the key that what causes depression, I believe. Now, again, remember, some people's depression is just seasonal. That would be an environmental depression. Some people's depression is just chemical. That's environmental, but it's also your diet, whatever else. So it could come from anywhere from the environment to your friends, could be coming because you just lost your mom, could be coming from all these different things. If you're feeling depression, though, there is a pretty good indication that your overs and your unders are against your values. And so the hard part about that is you only have 2 choices: change your values or change your game.
Right.
And that's so hard, right? Because you're depressed. And notice depression, like anxiety is overly aroused and depression is underly aroused. Mm-hmm. And if you notice, depression is natural to be under aroused because you're over aroused.
Well, yeah, because this is what I see. I get really anxious. I'm like, I can't handle it. So I just get rid of all the stimulus, and then I end up depressed. So it's like, okay, this is bad.
But that's not bad, Annette. Let me just suggest a fix, because when people go from anxiety, boom, and they're crushed and their life is 2 tenths, then they swing to depression, boom, 2 tenths. then they swing back, but
Mhm.
you don't usually swing this way in a day. You'll be stressed for 4 weeks, and then you're blown out, you've shut down your adrenal system, and then you swing to depression.
Right.
So let me let you in on a secret. What if we don't swing so long? What if we try to swing that way every hour? So what if we compensate for our overstimulation by understimulating in the hour, and then overstimulating and then understimulating? So what I'm literally saying is you're going to let yourself get amped up, and then I want you to learn to calm yourself down in the hour.
Okay.
If you
Because you had
can't,
talked about oscillating on our last
yeah.
episode, but you didn't say about the hour before. See, I'm writing all this down. So
Well,
within the hour.
well, by the way, and if you can't do it, by the way, just so you know, every Buddhist monk would say you have to do it always in the now.
Mm-hmm.
So just as you're experiencing the stress, you can also be noticing it and breathing through it. Remember, breathing is the #1 solution to bring down that oscillation. So if you, for some odd reason, are incapable of oscillating up and down in the hour, then just do it every 2 hours. And if you can't do it then do it every 3 hours. And if you can't do it then do it every 5. And if you can't do it in a day, then do it every other day. But the longer you go, the harder your fall, right? So it's the higher you amp. When you climb Everest, if you fall off Everest, it's a huge fall. That's the depression.
Right.
You're going to make a big depression when you hit. But if you could like up and down and oscillate, I mean, the really truly like meditative, mindful people try to not be on and off. They try to do it simultaneously.
Really?
Yeah. And so, I mean, if you think about it, it's pretty much probably what Christ was doing. And then what you also would notice is he'd go on a 40-day fast and he'd get away from everybody. And so that's probably where he needed big moments. And he'd always climb the mountain to the temple, right? Or just like to the symbolic mountain. And so sometimes we all need to have our mountain. We need to have our safe space.
Mm-hmm.
And weirdly, at work, it's sometimes hard. I remember when I worked for BYU on the radio, BYU radio, I'd go do my show for 3 hours, and it would so amp me because I'd have to be on so much that I needed a 1-hour walk after, whatever the weather. I was out walking, and it would always oscillate me back. And then it's hard. I'm not saying any of this is easy. It's just if you have anxiety, this is the way. So notice the obstacle is having to oscillate, and that's the way. I mean, you can try it another way. It's just, you know how many people I know that have blown out their adrenal glands. They have no more adrenaline. Their entire system's shutting down. They have to caffeinate every day just to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just amped. And then they're 50 and they've got nothing. They've got nothing left. Like they're tired. Yeah. That's why they're looking forward to the second coming. Like, let's get this thing done.
Well, I want you to know I don't spend too much time in the.
No, that's good. Annette, a lot of people are right now. And
I know. And the thing is, it started with somebody sending me a YouTube video that I had never seen. And my eyes just popped open like, what? Yeah. And so I've seen a few more, and I'm going to do an episode on it because I think it's super fascinating. But I do recognize the danger of, it's like you said, dreaming or whatever. Because to me, it's awesome. I can't wait. Yeah, but I also know that if I spend too much time thinking about that I'm not addressing the now. Yeah. And I don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
At all.
You know, another thing that I would make sure everyone that's listening is thinking about is our God is a God of love, and our God is a God of relationship and connection. We've kind of, just as you read the Old Testament, you start to think he's a punitive God that's going to come in and he's going to crush some souls and he's going to burn the earth. So one of the things to notice is watch what you feel. Because if you're feeling fear, then your mind is creating a story about your God that is fearful, which makes sense to your mind, but it's totally contradictory to your spirit. Your spirit is excited to meet God because you're just excited because you love him. Mm-hmm. if there's fear, and this is actually a really cool principle of anxiety, is anxiety is, it's nothing more than high arousal that is deemed negative. Okay, so here's two sides of a coin argument again on anxiety, and this is what I teach in my course on anxiety. But it's for every piece of arousal of anxiety, if you flip it over, there's an equal emotional arousal of excitement. Anxiety and excitement are exactly the same arousal. It's just interpreted positively or negatively. When we are excited, that's positive. When we are negative, that's negative arousal of anxiety. So when LeBron James has to shoot a game-winning shot and they tell him on the sideline, run this play and throw it to LeBron, LeBron feels that feeling that we would probably call anxiety, but he feels it's excitement. So anytime, and there's some cool research on this, that anytime you feel anxiety, all you have to do is recognize, oh, I'm feeling excited, and then talk about the inverse value that you want to create. Anxiety is the fear of failing, let's say. So let's say you've got a big presentation coming up and you're totally worried and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so worried about this talk. Instead of saying I'm so worried, just stop yourself, notice what your mind is doing, framing it negatively, and frame it positively. Oh, I'm excited for the talk so that I can share with people my feelings about the Savior. And now your brain is going to interpret this emotion as exciting. So as somebody that speaks professionally all the time, I feel the same. I feel anxiety, but I actually just see it as exciting. This is going to be so exciting to be able to connect with people and to be able to reach people. So it's all that is the reframe. And the minute your brain thinks it's good for you, it actually turns off some of the negative thinking about it for you.
Isn't that interesting?
It's the same thing.
Our brains are so crazy and so complex, but it sounds to me like if we can figure out the best way to train ourselves, how to handle our brain, the happier we'll be no matter where we're at, what we're doing.
Right.
And so you mentioned your anxiety class, which I have been waiting for so patiently. So I'm glad, not so patiently, but I'm glad that before we started recording, you mentioned that you are launching the class. So tell us about that.
Right now, it's perfect timing because right now we're launching it. So what it is, so I have been teaching all these things with my clients for years. And then everyone's like, write a book, write a book. So I started writing the book, and there are so many tools. And as I'm writing the book, I realized that if I'm going to finish the book before I do the workshop, which would be best, anyway. So I wrote, what I ended up writing is 42 emails. So you'll get one a day, and it's called the Fast Track to Peace. And you get one email a day from me. And what I'll do is then I teach you a principle that is basically, there's 5 keys I teach to getting on the road to peace. The first is put yourself in the driver's seat. Basically examine your anxious thoughts and your anxious thinking. Attend to, accurately act on your anxiety. What does C stand for? Create your own calmness code. So you're going to customize your own path. And then I want you to enjoy the ride. And behind each one of these 5 areas, there's 5 or 6 different tools. And then there's a whole part at the beginning about, are you a high performance person, which is basically, are you a Ferrari in a world full of Chevys? And we teach this concept of high sensitivity in Ferrari. So what we do is, if anyone wants to, you just go to matttownsend.com, and on Black Friday, we're giving a huge cut of the price off of it. And then we're gonna have a sale on it basically from Black Friday through, actually, you can, I think, go right now, and I think you can still get the deal.
Oh,
okay. But it's right now through Black Friday through Cyber Monday, and you'll get an email a week, or an email a day, sorry, for 42 days. And then you also become a member of our Facebook group. And in the Facebook group, I'm going to start launching 5-minute solutions. There's about 100, I have right now at least probably 120 solutions, research-based ways to minimize anxiety. And so we'll just start putting those videos out. And then once that's going, I'm going to start working on a full workshop with more in-depth tools that go along with the emails you're getting. And then I'll finish the book.
Awesome.
So that starts right away. So just go to matttownsend.com, look for the anxiety class, and we'll be launching it, and you'll start getting your emails by Black Friday.
Sweet. All right. So I'm going to be posting this episode probably tomorrow, which is the 21st. And so if you're listening, go ahead and check out matttownsend.com. As soon as we get off this recording, I'm going to go sign up, because I can't wait. I'm so excited by the idea of being able to learn enough tools so that when I start feeling those feelings, I'll know what to do.
That's the key.
To take this high sensitivity and turn it into something that is like a positive.
Yeah, something cool, because remember, it's a great trait. It's a great gift. We also, in this program, I show you, we're going to go identify what your top 5 signature strengths are of character.
Yay.
And so then you're going to use those 5 strengths along with your high sensitivity to create the first 6 cylinders for your Ferrari. Those are the tools you're going to use to get out of your problems.
You know what, this is why I was supposed to record with you today, because just this last week, I've been doing a lot of praying and talking to Heavenly Father about what He wants from me. And recently I've had people tell me that I'm not good at seeing my own strengths. And Heavenly Father said, you have got to see your strengths. So I actually went on Facebook and I said, friends, I've been told I don't see my strengths. Can you help me out here? And I got all this list of people telling me my strengths, and some of them were quite surprising. And so I was, that's the way I've been heading anyway. And so it all kind of dovetails with it. So I am super, super jazzed.
You're going to, you know what, you're going to love it, because there is some awesome research about your signature strengths that basically show you that 93% of people that use their strengths 10 plus hours a week are happy, but only 1 in 4 of us do. And so we're going to help you identify, because strengths, sometimes people don't know exactly what their character strengths are, but I call them, they're your virtues. And you were in heaven with your Heavenly Father, creating virtues and growing in strength for eons. And those virtues are in you. And some of them you are already a master of. You're a ninja in these virtues. You just don't know what they are. And then sometimes some of our virtues we don't even know they're good. My number 1 character strength is social intelligence. My number 2 is spirituality. My number 3 is perspective and wisdom. My number 4 is creativity. My number 5 is love of learning. And my number 6 is fun and playfulness. I use those every single day of my life. And by the way, I'm not bragging. I just lucked out. I just found them because I didn't know them. I intuited them. But we're going to show you how to find them. We're going to show you how to use them to actually combat your anxiety. Because when you're not healthy. You're not, if I don't use my social intelligence, I'm not healthy. And anytime I get anxious and I have a meeting or whatever that I need to go to and I feel insecure, I immediately think of my strengths. Look, I'm socially intelligent. I can handle it. I'll make it fun. I'll be creative. I've got perspective. God's with me. And once I think through these thoughts, boom, I feel peace.
I love that. And I've been trying to figure out for several years the best way to live a fulfilling life. And so what you're saying about using your strengths every day makes so much sense to me, and why I want to avoid taking work that doesn't let me utilize those strengths.
Yeah.
Otherwise you start, like your book, you're starved, right?
Yeah, you start to starve.
Yeah.
And let me let you know another little crazy secret I've learned is that once you know what your strengths are, you can take them into any job. And what you do is you adapt the job to your strength. And so I can take my strengths. Now, I wouldn't have been a good lawyer, probably. I mean, I would have to a point, but it would have stressed me. But if I went in as a lawyer and my top 5 or 6 strengths, it wouldn't have stressed me. My lowest strength, by the way, Annette, is self-regulation. I don't regulate myself. I don't plan my schedule very well. So I have people around me that have to tell me where to be, when to be. But here's the cool thing. I'll never be happier. If I move my 24th strength up 1, it won't make me happier.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I try to regulate is not even using self-regulation. I use social intelligence, my number 1. So I regulate socially. I regulate spiritually. I regulate with perspective and wisdom and creativity and fun. So I don't even try to be on time per se. I mean, I try, but if I'm with somebody that needs me, I'll give them 5 more minutes. And then and that seems horrible to some people. But then I have the social ability when I'm with them to do the same thing with them, so they don't care about that. Does that make sense? So just know, once you know your strengths, it is the core of happiness.
I was going to say, doesn't it make more sense to figure out what your strengths are and to just make them stronger and bigger part of your life rather than constantly focusing on your weaknesses and it's funny that you said lawyer, because that's my training. That's what I used to do, and it didn't make me happy at all.
Doesn't make me
because I suspect that some of my strengths are similar to what you just listed.
Yeah, you're already doing them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so doing what I'm doing right now is using my strengths. And you can't do this very much with lawyering. So it's just.
No, you get it. You get it. And that's where peace comes from, right? It just comes from you. By the way, and that's what God wants you to do is, so we think we're down here so devoid of the Spirit, but we also have those gifts in us that are tools that we don't know what they are. But there's immense research that healthy humans are living their virtues, period. From the beginning of time, that's been taught. And most of us don't know what our virtues are specifically, right? We think, we might think we have charisma, but charisma is not a virtue. Charisma is the mix of 3 virtues, right? Like social intelligence, zest for life, and fun and playfulness or whatever. But it's more valuable to not have charisma, but it's better to know that what my number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are. And by the way, you have 24, boom, 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 in a row, and your top 10 you're amazing at. And anytime you feel down and depressed, fastest way to get out of that is to get to your strengths and do something with it. Turn those strengths out and start working on it, or turn the strengths in and use your good virtues on yourself.
Awesome. So your class is going to let us discover those strengths.
Yeah, we'll teach you the tools around that. And then that's what I teach all my clients with anxiety. Within the first day or 2 that I'm with them, they know what their strengths are. And then every time they come to me with a new issue, we go back to their strengths. They already have a full deck. We just need to show you how to play the deck better.
Are you doing virtual sessions right now with your clients?
Yeah, we do a ton of virtual and a ton of, I still do half and half live and half online.
Oh, okay. So if there are people out there that don't live near Draper, you'll do
anywhere. And really, my big belief is too, once you have a lot of these skills, you don't need me a lot. You might need me a little bit once a month or something. But once you've got the tools, then it's just going back to you playing your code. Everyone has their own little code. So we'll teach you to find your code, and then you're just going to live your code.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I am very grateful that you came on today. This is just, it's confirming with me everything's kind of coming together for me. The stuff that I've been working on the last week, it's all been
it's all the
right
same
here in this episode. I just love it when that happens.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful that you were willing to come on and share with us. And I'm grateful to my listeners for listening. So they can find you at matttownsend.com.
Yeah.
And they can find the anxiety class. It will be on the top of the website.
And they can go to Instagram and look up Dr. Matt. I think Dr. Matt Townsend. And we every 2 or 3 days I release another 2 or 3 minute video called Matt's Minutes that are just tons of tools to help people with life and relationships and everything.
Yay! Awesome. All right. Well, I am going to let you go because you were gracious enough to give me your lunch hour today. And thank you so much. And thank you for listening. All my listeners, go to matttownsend.com. Check it out. I swear this will be worth your while. And listen to this episode again if you need to, and go back and listen to the other 2 with Matt. And you can find it on youtube.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, et cetera, et cetera. You can also find me on AnnetteTalks.com. Thank you for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, where freedom lovers gather.